It's June of 2023, and I'm about to see Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse for the very first time. The previous film, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, was easily my favorite movie of 2018, and maybe my favorite movie ever, with its killer soundtrack, fantastic story, and frankly revolutionary art style, which sparked a 3D animated renaissance that's still going today. It just blew me away. The film's creators might as well have reached in my skull and rewired my brain. Spider Man has been one of my favorite superheroes for basically my entire life, and this film was such a perfect representation of everything that I love about that character. So when it came time to see the sequel, I was excited, of course, but also a little nervous. As I sat down in my theater chair, only one thought was going through my head. With over 5 years of buildup, how could it possibly meet my expectations? And I'll be honest, when I first came out of the theater, I wasn't sure that it had. Since that initial viewing, however, I've realized over the course of my many subsequent rewatches that maybe that doesn't matter. When I take a step back from that first viewing and look broadly at the themes of the Spider Verse films and what they're trying to say about the nature of comic book storytelling, the answer to my question is simple. Across the Spider Verse might not live up to our expectations, and that's okay. It's not trying to. So to start, let's talk about what I love about the Spider-Verse films. Not just, like I said, their glorious soundtrack or stunning animation, although don't get me wrong, those things rock. The thing that makes the Spider-Verse films special to me is just how self-aware they are. How often they dip into the territory of metafiction and consciously allude to their own artificial nature. Throughout both Spider-Verse movies, we can see stylistic references to their comic book origins everywhere. Whether it's the Comics Code Authority stamp of approval, caption boxes that match the character's internal monologue, scene composition that looks like a panel layout, or literal Spider-Man comics littered throughout the films, the Spider-Verse movies aren't afraid to embrace the wackier elements of their origins. They aren't afraid to be comic book movies. Instead, they revel in it. Considering the influence of writing and producing duo Phil Lord and Chris Miller, maybe this shouldn't be particularly surprising. Some of their previous collaborations include their first endeavor, the MTV series Clone High, and 2014's The Lego Movie, which both showcase the pair's interest in metafiction to varying degrees. First released in 2002, Clone High is an adult animated sitcom following the clones of famous historical figures like Abraham Lincoln, Joan of Arc, JFK, and more as they traverse the epic highs and lows of high school. Building from this setup, the show doesn't directly acknowledge that it's fiction. It's not like the characters are regularly breaking the fourth wall, but it does draw attention to it through parody, usually targeting other shows in the 2010 drama category like Degrassi or Dawson's Creek. Lord and Miller's later collaboration, The Lego Movie, on the other hand, fully draws attention to the fictional nature of its story. After spending nearly an hour and 18 minutes of its hour and 40-minute runtime following Emmett Brakowski's attempts to stop the evil President Business from using an artifact known as the Kraggle to freeze Lego people in place, the film zooms out from its story. And spoilers for a movie from over a decade ago here, transitions from 3D animation to live action. Here, it reveals the entire previous storyline had actually been one dreamt up by a young boy playing with his father's Lego collection. In this moment, it calls attention to both the character's status as toys and the narrative status as a work of fiction. It's such an inspired choice that really forces you to reckon with the story you're being told. The Lego Movie is so much better than it really has any right to be, and I think a lot of that is thanks to Lord and Miller's interest in not just taking the easy way out, not just making a cash grab about Legos, but really trying to represent what's made Legos so iconic. the stories we use them to tell. So with respect to these two reference points then, the Spider-Verse films sit somewhere in the middle. They're not knowing parodies or fully fictitious narratives within their own movie, but they're still interested in the idea of storytelling. The Spider-Verse series is made up of comic book movies that are obsessed with the idea of being just that, comic book movies. We can see this from the very first scene of the first film, when that Spider-Man comic flips to the cover and Peter Parker says,
All right, let's do this one last time.
with its first line, the film suggests that this is a story the viewer should already know. And of course we do. He's Spider-Man. He's a cultural juggernaut. He's had 11 cartoons, 3 separate live-action film franchises, multiple video games, he's been a parade balloon, he's been a popsicle, he's done this.
We don't really talk about this.
I mean, how could we not know Spider-Man? And the film uses this scene to immediately begin developing its core theme: the weight of expectations. Not only do the other characters have expectations for themselves and each other, but we, the audience, have expectations too. Whether you're a die-hard Spider-Man fan, or you just know the basics thanks to cultural osmosis, if you're going to see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, you probably know how this story is supposed to go. And the film uses that fact to its advantage. Each time a new Spider-Person is introduced, they get their own comic book opening, demonstrating what is different about them, sure, but also showing us what's the same. Bitten by a radioactive spider becomes Spider-Man. Bitten by a radioactive spider becomes Spider-Man. Bitten by a radioactive spider and, say it with me now, becomes Spider-Man. By the time we're introduced to the final members of our supporting cast, we know this formula like the back of our hand. So well, in fact, that Spider-Ham, Noir, and Penny Parker don't even get their own unique segments, but instead share an overlapping montage. We only need the basic outlines of their differences. They're Spider-Man. We know the rest. As the movie goes on, it also uses our built-in understanding of Spider-Man's story for dramatic effect. When, following the death of Uncle Aaron, the other Spider people tell Miles of those they've lost, it's not a surprise when Spider-Ham says,
Miles, the hardest thing about this job is you can't always save everybody.
we might not know who he's referring to, but we do know exactly what he means. Whether it's Uncle Ben or Gwen Stacy, Spider-Man does lose people. It's the old Parker luck, an unavoidable part of the story, right? When we get to Across the Spider-Verse, this interest in metafiction and focus on narrative expectations shifts from being just stylistic to being baked into the film's structure. The movie establishes this early on, opening with the same glitching credits and Comics Code Authority stamp, setting us up to expect an introduction in the same style as the opening of the previous film. That's not what happens. Instead, we get a tightly written monologue from Gwen that recaps some of the first movie, sure, but also provides backstory on her character. And this introduction is substantially different from the first. It's darker and more serious, setting the tone the film will have, but it also establishes that we might need to second-guess our expectations here. There's a reason it opens with,
Let's do things differently this time. Like, so differently.
it tells us that this film's style will not necessarily be the same as the first. As Gwen's monologue progresses, she further emphasizes this fact, telling us,
You think you know the rest. You don't. I thought I knew the rest, but I didn't.
at the same time, the film is subtly reinforcing this idea through its visuals. And here's where things get really cool. You see, there's something special about the visuals of this opening montage. Something I'm not ashamed to admit that I didn't catch until maybe my third rewatch. The scenes that play in this opening are both scenes from the first film, like Jeff and Miles interacting in the alley after Aaron's death, and scenes from later in the second film, like Captain Stacy confronting Gwen, or Miguel telling Miles about Canon events. They're intercut to make it seem as if they flow from one to the other. If you want to talk about the intersection of metafiction and narrative expectations, you have to start here. The film's opening minutes are spent using its characters to tell us that we don't know what's going to happen, while simultaneously using its visuals to show us exactly what's going to happen. It's both telling us to check our expectations and subconsciously setting those expectations for the rest of the film. As it progresses, the film takes these initial concerns with narrative expectations and makes them an integral part of the plot. After Miles spends the first half of the movie longing to join Gwen as part of the Spider Society, he seems to get his chance when he's brought to meet Miguel O'Hara at Spider Society HQ. Here, Miguel and the other Spider people revealed their theory about what links each node of the arachno-humanoid polymultiverse. What connects the web of the Spider-Verse? And their answer is canon events. In the medium of comic books, canon is both extremely important and always a little bit messy. When your stories run for decades, things can come and go, be retconned or have happened in alternate continuities, or even be brought into canon after originating outside of it, like how Miles Morales jumped from the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610 to the main universe of Earth 616. As Christopher McGonagall puts it in his 2018 piece for Modern Language Studies,
over decades of maintaining such long narratives, low and high periods will occur as particular storylines either become permanently marked by negative responses from readers or become iconic to the character's history. The existence of parallel timelines and alternate futures makes such indefinitely serial narratives even more complicated. After 60 years of publishing, the entire narrative of all Marvel characters has become complicated and tied up.
Put simply, comics canon is always shifting, trying to make sense of decades of continuity. And Spider-Man fans know this better than anyone, for better and for worse. So, in an interesting contrast, Miguel's interpretation of Across the Spider-Verse's canon is surprisingly strict and tightly regulated. While acknowledging their own convoluted mix of alternate realities, you're going to have to when your team includes a cowboy Spider-Man, a car Spider-Man, a dinosaur Spider-Man, and more, Miguel uses his interpretation of canon to unify the multiple Spider people. He believes that canon events are unavoidable parts of Spider-Man's life, explaining that they are
chapters that are a part of every Spider story, every time.
They are the story beats that we as viewers and Spider-Man fans have come to know and expect. Like Miguel says,
that's how the story's supposed to go.
The particulars may be different, but whether it's the loss of an uncle, the death of a police captain, or the tragic end of a friend and love interest, the broad strokes of each of their stories are the same. Or not just the same, predetermined. The large chapters of their lives are already set. They're Spider-Man. We know the rest. It's a really fascinating take on the nature of narrative, expectations, and how both can seem to shape the lives of those caught up in their web. And it's one that we've already encountered in an earlier scene. Not this one, or this one, or this one, but this one. This scene, from the first 30 minutes of the movie, lays out all the concerns we'll see later in the conflict between Miles and the other Spider people. If you're surprised, don't worry, we'll break it down together. The scene opens with the guidance counselor declaring that every person is a universe, but she doesn't really know Miles or what he wants for his future. When she calls out his good grades, but poor attendance, she says,
"We can still salvage this."
She can still save his universe. And if you've been paying attention to the rest of this video, you might be able to guess how. It's through a narrative. Mirroring all of the other major character introductions in the series,
My name is Peter Parker.
My name is Gwen Stacy.
My name is Miguel O'Hara.
My name is Peter B. Parker.
She says,
Your name is Miles Morales. You grew up in a struggling immigrant family.
and just like that, she started to craft a story. It doesn't matter if it plays on stereotypes, it doesn't matter if it's not true. He is Miles Morales. She knows the rest. The whole family then resists her attempts to impose a narrative on them in their own way. Rio pointing out that they're not immigrants, Jeff saying that they're not struggling. But it doesn't really matter. If Miles wants to go to Princeton, this is the path he has to follow. And Miles does want to go to Princeton. He explains that they're experimenting with cross-dimensional travel, that there are people who can teach him what he wants to learn, and they're not all in Brooklyn. With the familiar theme from the first movie playing in the background, we know that this isn't about Princeton, not really. It's about seeing his friends and mentors and learning from them how to be Spider-Man. The guidance counselor moved says that's his story. Now, he just has to follow the script. But with hindsight, we know that he doesn't. When he does encounter the other Spider people again, they don't teach him or offer guidance. They instead try to impose their own expectations on him, literally putting him in a box as they attempt to force him to undergo a painful story beat. He escapes, rejects their canon, and in what reads like a callback to his earlier declaration that having a story at all seems gross, he delivers the now iconic line.
Everyone keeps telling me how my story is supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.
Whether it's the guidance counselor or Miguel O'Hara, others keep trying to shape Miles' story themselves. But now he's realized that he doesn't need their guidance. He doesn't need others to teach him how to be a hero, and he doesn't need to follow their script or meet their expectations, because he knows who he is. He's Spider-Man, and only he knows the rest. So to return to the question that started this video, I think it's pretty easy to see why Across the Spider-Verse may not have initially met my expectations. These are stories about stories. One's deeply concerned with understanding what we expect from the typical Spider-Man narrative, what the characters expect from each other, and how they can subvert the expectations of audience and character alike. It's a choice that may not be immediately easy to love, but one that I find more and more interesting every time I watch these movies. And it's also why I'm personally really excited for how Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to continue to develop these ideas, especially with the introduction of Miles G. Morales. This is a version of Miles whose life, with his struggling family, late father, and lack of spider powers, conforms more to the narratives put forward by both Miles's guidance counselor and Miguel's idea of the canon. We're about to be confronted with a version of Miles who is both similar and different to the one we know. One who is not Spider-Man, but who might still be his own kind of hero, and who makes us question not just what it means to be Spider-Man, but what it means to be Miles Morales. Like the introduction of Across the Spider-Verse, these films are going to once again make us reconsider our expectations. The Spider-Verse films use their interest in their own origins and the expected story beats of comic book movies to create something truly unique. So I'm willing to admit that, like Gwen said, I don't know the rest, but I'm excited to find out.